Good morning and welcome to we haven't decided what our regular slot is, have we yet? It's sometimes
it's a difficult decision.
Sometimes it's Sunday mornings, sometimes it might be Friday afternoons, which isn't the best way to build an audience, but we're all busy people and we try and fit this in when we can. So Sundays is looking probably as best as it's going to be for a while, and Sunday mornings this week. So good morning to Martin. How you doing, Martin?
I'm doing very well, very well. Yeah, busy at the moment.
Good morning to Alex. So the reason you're busy, Martin, is you've got a big day coming up. Well,
yes, I am. It's my birthday on Saturday.
Oh,
Saturday, sorry.
Saturday. Next Saturday. But before then, do you reckon that there's a possibility, albeit a relatively small one according to you, that you might be a councillor again by your birthday?
I mean, say relatively small. The feedback I'm getting is really good. And I got a private comment from somebody who was out with the Conservatives that told me I was getting really good name recognition on the doorstep. I've worked hard, slamming leaflets out, got a few guys out helping me as well, which has been really good. And I've been a bit different this time. Last time I tried to run a positive campaign and say, if you want to know the negative stuff, go onto my blog. But I've really, especially had a go at the Conservatives this time because I think I need to let people know what it's like in Finland with the Conservatives in control. So I've been upfront about it, and it's not something I'm comfortable doing.
Do you think it gets good feedback? Because what I found, I think it depends on the area, but what I found sometimes when they do more negative campaign, it actually can backfire because you have low trust in politics, and actually they can actually say, well, I had enough of negative leaflets, I just want to see something positive about the area.
I have at the same time I've put forward a positive agenda more than anybody else about what I want to achieve, and I've tried to be honest about it. So I'll give you a good example. We've got I think both the other candidates, and certainly one of the two, have said, they're going to get Kingsdyke Bridge fixed. Well, Kingsdyke Bridge is already being fixed. So I've not said that. What I've said is I want to learn the lessons from what happened so that we don't get a repeat. And the other thing is getting a bus stop there fixed as well, which has been broken for ages and ages. Something ran into it, I think. So I've talked about positive agendas, about things like I've talked about things like what can we do to revitalize our town centre. We have some great events in Whittlesey, really, really good events, but not enough of them, and they're basically run by volunteers. So part of it is what can we do to liven up our town centre. I've talked about one of the things that I'll be fair, Chris Bowden, the leader of the Conservatives, has pushed forward with is studies into a relief road for Whittlesey, which I think we need because our roads are getting more and more congested. And I've said I'll support that as an example. But at the same time, good example, we've had another planning application for 249 homes approved in Whittlesey. And I've not gone out and said that's a bad decision. I think it's from a policy perspective, it's a no-brainer. It had to be approved. But we're still working off a 2014 local plan. They've suspended. Yeah, well, they've suspended the local plan process again. Because of I'm told because of local government reorganisation. But if you go onto Fenland District Council's website, I think, as you know, others might not, the programme for how you're going to deliver your local plan is set out in a thing called a local development scheme. And Fenland so far I've seen, there's 4 different local development schemes actually on their website. And the 4th one hasn't been updated. But actually, we were supposed to have been consulted about a draft local plan last month. And obviously that hasn't happened. So obviously they're not running to timetable. I'm told they basically stopped the process. And when you're running on what is basically a windfall policy for 249 homes, which is a disaster, you can't afford to do it. And this notion that we're going to have to go into local government reorganisation, probably become part of Peterborough, without a local plan in place, it's frightening.
Yes. We'll talk a bit about the latest developments in LGR because things are getting a bit hot as we approach the November deadline for submitting. Well, each council will submit its best ideas for what it wants to do with government. I don't think there's a mini consensus, but as that goes on, I mean, the attitude in Huntingdonshire is completely the opposite. We're going full guns blazing, try and get our local plan finished in almost record time, so it's in place, ready for LGR. And so, you know, the voice of our people and our communities will hopefully be heard when that local plan gets integrated into all the other local plans whoever we merge with, which I think is a sensible option because, you know, there's going to be a lot to do, isn't there, in the areas of LGR, and starting again with local plans is not one thing that anybody wants to really tackle because that's a multi-year project. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but there's so many other reasons as well. We've got Paul Bristow setting out proposals, which I think are becoming formal this week for the local growth plan for Cambridgeshire. And what you would want is your local plan to be in place before that's delivered, so that your local plan informs his growth plan.
Yeah,
and not the other way round, and so, you know, again, it's another reason why you need to crack on and get this thing done. But you know, it's one of the number of areas where, you know, I think Fetland is a bit of a disaster at the moment. You know, aside from all the bullying stuff that's forcing by-election after by-election in Whittlesea. You've got inaction that is harming the people of Fenland, and that's the reason I stood. I wouldn't have stood if I didn't think, and I wasn't at a point where I just thought I've absolutely had enough with Fenland. And part of the reason is I look elsewhere around the county, and I don't see anything that's anywhere as close to being as bad as Fenland.
But if anything, it's good to have, I think, more competitive elections, because I think in Finland, in a lot of areas, seats went uncontested, and that's obviously, in my view, the fault of like other political parties who haven't like put up candidates or campaigns. So actually having more independents and having more parties contesting the seats can only be good for democracy, really.
And I have to say, the Labour candidate, we have got a Labour candidate, and that's probably a good thing, although it probably doesn't benefit me. But the Labour candidate hasn't properly campaigned at all. They've put out a leaflet, but it's a generic Labour Party leaflet. I had a chat with a Labour Party guy who was delivering them a week ago, a nice enough chap, and I said to him, you know, I'd really like the Labour Party to properly start campaigning in Fenland, because there's opportunity there.
I really hate this paper candidate thing. I really do. It's just point. I mean, it's a bit disingenuous to the electorate, isn't it? It's people who think they're voting for a potential candidate, and because it's very, very rarely, it must happen occasionally, very, very rarely, that a paper candidate who doesn't campaign gets elected off basically.
Yeah, it can happen. Probably not in this election, but
No.
I have to say, though, doing a leaflet, even if you don't have a door leaflet, is not really a paper candidate, because you still put in the effort. But we have plenty of candidates who stand and don't do not even like one leaflet. So that's already like a bit of obviously organization and so on. And candidates don't do that.
There's nothing that informs the electorate about who the candidate is and what they stand for. It was a generic Labour Party national leaflet.
Okay, fair enough. I thought you meant it was like an intro, like one of the
but it's still better than nothing, and at least it does let the electorate know that actually the Labour Party is still around in Whittlesea, and that's not a bad thing. But I mean, there were certainly Reform councillors who won in May who were paper candidates,
and or who had national leaflets as well, because some of the templates were, you know, Nigel Farage national leaflets. Maybe I think most of them did have the candidate name and picture, but the content was national. So
a lot of what we've had from Reform this time is national, though. There's a couple of little local issues that he's put in, but nothing that's significantly important. But one of his local issues is to stop immigration affecting Whittlesea, basically, which we've not been horrendously impacted by immigration anyway. But it's one of those things that you've got to slap it in there because you're a Reform candidate. And I presume there'll be a few people that vote for it because he's Reform and because he said immigration, blah, blah, blah. But it's not something that serves the people of Whittlesea, to be fair.
I mean, what's interesting is that like quite a few of the Reform leaflets had lines around it, either small boats or migration, the local elections, I mean, the county elections. And so far, I'm yet to see, especially in our committee system in the county council. Like we sometimes have papers that refer to, for example, county of sanctuary or other migration related things. And I'm yet to hear anyone very vocally commenting within, the council's meetings and committee structures about this. I mean, maybe I'll see it at full council next time, but I expected a lot more, I guess, negative commentary or backlash, especially when there are papers that are relevant to, obviously we don't set immigration policy, but some of the, I guess, services and support and information given to new communities in the county. So it's positive that there's not a lot of, negative commentary about that, but, to me, but at the same time, I'm quite surprised there's not more issues more politicized.
Yeah, I would have thought one of the things that you would have got a lot of, and you may have had some in some of the committees because you obviously can't be on all of them, but is around translation services, because that's one of the things they hit. It's one of the things that UKIP hit as well, and then they realised they couldn't do it. And it's one of those areas where I'm really, really uneasy about us cutting that back funding on it, because I think it's I think it's immoral, is a reality. If you've got things like, your children being threatened with being taken into care, or older people having services delivered for them, they have a right to be able to understand, exactly why and what is happening. But we know that one of the things in its first leaflet, the Reform candidate put out in Whittlesea, he talked about campaigning against homes of multiple occupation. And we have a grand total of 0 in Whittlesea. And so he hasn't mentioned that again because I pointed it out on my blog. But it's one of those things where you look at it and think, it's sort of desperate stuff that's you're trying to play on with people's worst fears almost.
But also, there's very little that a district councillor can do about those things anyway. So we've done it. I brought a motion, I brought a paper to full council where at Huntingdonshire we do impose, we're going to impose the maximum possible penalties to people who've got unoccupied properties, but those things are basically limited by government, and I think those things are relatively easy to get through councils because everybody agrees that having lots of empty properties in any community is a bad thing. And so this is the problem, isn't it? Is when people are elected, they don't get that much influence on many of these things. Certainly not the Fortune Crossing, which is a county council issue, which is out of anybody's control at the moment, apart from the county council. You can speak on them and you can be a voice in the community. I get it, but in terms of direct influence, there's very little.
Yeah, there is Kingsdyke Crossing, I think, is a great example. There's not a lot you can do in terms of delivery. You can push to get the repairs done. And I'm assuming some of that happened with some of our councillors, to make sure that happens. And the other thing to do, because there's a lot of people in Whittlesea fearing the worst over Kingsdyke, that it might end up basically being closed permanently, is to make the case and make the case now that if push comes to shove, it is unacceptable for Whittlesea not to have a crossing over that railway. A proper sort of bridge, and you could do those sort of things. But there's a reality which you've got to trust. You've got to trust engineers, Stephen. To say we can fix this, and which is what they've said.
Is the contractor, whatever contractor we used to build it under pressure or not? Because you do these big projects like the busway, where the county council ended up suing the people who made the busway, whose name I forget temporarily. Yeah, and there's long.
Well, I can tell you it was, but I'm not going to repeat it because it was a long time ago. I was leader when we put that legal dispute to bed, and it was the Lib Dems portrayed that deal as a big failure and everything else. We got £30 million back from them. I think it was 30 million.
And again, I mean, it's important that the local authority has a voice in these things, but as individual councillors, you've got very, very little say in the matter.
The contractor doing Kingsdyke Crossing is a contractor called Jones Brothers, and the liability, as I understand it, and this has come from the county council, for the repairs on that bridge that are being done fall on them and not on the council. Which is how it should be, because it's a new bridge, and if they haven't built it to spec when they said they could, or not built it to spec, they haven't built it so it's acceptable, then it should fall on them.
Are they a big national company or not a local one? Are they?
They're not local. They're a big engineering company. They haven't done a lot around here, and I always got the impression that the reason they bid quite low for the bridge crossing, which I think they did, was because it gave them a foothold in this area, basically. Because I've not heard of them doing a lot around here before.
Okay. So your election for the Whittlesea Northwest Ward by-election, is there a town council election at the same time as any district?
It is. I'm standing for both, actually. So it's yeah.
So for the district council, there's 4 candidates. There's Alec George Branton from the Conservative Unionist Party, Mike Curtis, Independent, Kevin Ian Michael Marston from Reform UK, and Teresa Okogwa from the Labour Party. So we're expecting a 2-horse race, Martin, between you and Reform, or a 3-horse race? Where are the Conservatives placed?
I think a 3-horse race. It's worth saying, I'm going to say this, quick plug. I'm endorsed by stopthetories.vote and stopreformuk.vote as the best tactical voting candidate to stop either of those winning.
They haven't decided which one is to be stopped.
Well,
then
when you look at the election result for the county council elections, Chris Bowden won that seat as the county councillor, but it was pretty close.
How much was it due to his, I guess, personal votes, do you think? Because obviously Chris Bowden has been there and he's very well known.
Yeah, no, I think quite a lot. To be fair to Chris, he's one of the few Conservatives that ever dares to go on social media and actually post anything, on the Whittlesea pages and stuff. And he does do that, and people notice it. So, to be fair to him, he's done that. But, he's also the group leader at Fenland. And, we've had how many years of people complaining about bullying within the Conservative group, and nothing's been done.
And it's a multi-member ward. There's going to be 2 district councillors for that ward, is there?
That's right. Yeah. So the other district councillors are Conservative. D Laws, again, good councillor. But I think this is me putting words. This is me saying this, not D. But I feel like a lot of them are stifled by being part of the Conservative group, because I don't think it's a good group. And I think that's true of town council and district. And Fenland desperately needs some change, but the Conservative majority is huge.
Okay, so let's move on to county matters then. And Reform haven't had the best of week at county council, have they? Because they've lost. Is it their first council they've lost?
Yeah, so there's not 9 now out of 10 initially.
Yeah, well, so this coming.
He's still on the council, but as non-aligned independent.
Yeah, so this coming from John Elworthy, who the other day, last time we spoke, I said John Elworthy had retired, because he did retire. Yeah. But then I got a message from John saying that he's unretired again now as well. So I'm not surprised that he couldn't stay away from local politics. But this from John Elworthy at Cambs News: Reform rocked as Cambridgeshire councillor quietly quits the party. So this is Des Watt, who is the councillor from Yaxley and Farset. Is it Yaxley and Farset or Fawcett? I always get told off when I say it. Farset.
Or Facet.
Yeah, Facet. Facet is the one. So Des won that by, it's quite a margin in the end. He beat Andrew Wood from the Lib Dems. I remember talking to Andrew at the count, and Andrew thought he had won it for a long time and was quite surprised when Des scooped by and won the election. So Des, we don't know the actual reason why, do we? So as John says, it's a quiet departure. He's not made any big statements. Certainly no clowns with crayons statements. But the fact is, so they were neck and neck, weren't they, with the Conservatives as the largest potential opposition group. So that leaves the Conservatives under Ross Martin as the biggest, as the official opposition, I guess, at county council. Is that true?
Yeah, that's as I understand it now. It's the Conservatives as the official main opposition now, which I'm sure they'll take as a success. But it's the thing for me about this. It doesn't sit in isolation. And this is, if it was one Reform candidate who had resigned, since May, you could sit and say, okay, it's one candidate. But I mean, in Cambridgeshire, we've got that change. We've also got Councillor Osborne in court for allegedly some of the stuff that he's said during the election campaign. Same guy, quite rightly under scrutiny because of the awful things he said about children in care. That's just in Cambridgeshire. And then you look at, I'm going to plug this. It's a guy called Mark Pack, who I think is a Lib Dem. Oh, he's a Lib Dem peer. There you go. And a political polling expert, apparently. He's got a list on his blog of all the candidates that Reform has lost since May, all the councillors that Reform has lost since May. 27.
Yeah,
that's since May 2025, and it just shows you it's what I expected to happen. By the way,
it doesn't
surprise me. Yeah. It doesn't surprise me. It's exactly what happened with UKIP. A lot of these guys will be decent guys who are sitting and looking around them and thinking, "Who have I been elected with?" And I know there's a leadership election potentially, which I think Alex knows more about than me. But I suspect somewhere in and around that seems to be where we are with this change with Des Watt. But, you know, you go through that also. I think there's 8 Reform councils. After all the stuff they were saying about Reform-run councils, after all the stuff we had about this so-called Doge squad that was going to come in and find efficiency savings and everything else, 8 Reform councils have said they're going to have to increase council tax by at least the rate of inflation.
Well, I think what would be interesting with the Reform-led councils is how many survive or are happy to stick with the group after their first budget. Because, yes, indeed, a lot of the Reform leaders now realize you have to raise council tax to be able to run the council without cutting services massively in their cases. And there have been some articles around, for example, Kent County Council wanting to increase by the maximum that is allowed. And some of the, I guess, not disagreement, but some of the conversations in that particular group. So it'll be interesting what happens after that first budget cycle, because I think everyone is like usually quite happy until you come to the very difficult decisions. And then you might think, well, you know, I stood on a manifesto of not ever increasing council tax, like many of their leaflets said in other parts of the country. And you might think, well, you know, how can I vote for this? And if someone who's not like very, I guess, used to being in politics and making those kind of compromise and conversations, they might, some more, you can see more people quitting after that budget cycle, I think, as well. Who knows? We will see.
Yeah, if you look at that list of Mark Pax, if you look at this, Kent, Robert Ford suspended by Reform UK, Amelia Randall switched to UKIP, bizarre, and Daniel Taylor suspended by Reform UK. 3 Kent Reform County councillors who are no longer members of Reform. You know, so it shows that, you know, all is not sunny.
But part of that's also what happens if you have a brilliant election, you don't have very good selection criteria, and you get swept into power in places. And there's lots of times when, you know, people get elected who you wouldn't have otherwise expected to be elected. You haven't done proper kind of scrutiny of them before their candidature, and you do get people who are not suited to be councillors. You also get people who didn't expect to be elected, suddenly find themselves elected and realise what a horrendous time commitment it is. And what an all-round depressing job it could be sometimes, and they don't fancy it either. So there's all some of that going on, isn't there? As well as, I mean, I think it's part of the growing pains of a new party, as well as all the things that you said, Martin, which I completely agree with. But
I say this. You say about scrutiny, okay? I'm trying to find the quote at the moment, but I am pretty sure that before the county council elections, and as Reform was starting to throw candidates up and do all that stuff, I'm sure somewhere Nigel Farage said that the scrutiny of Reform candidates would be better than any other party has ever done.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure he said about, I don't know, if you think about like not to defend him at all, but like, and the Councillor Osborne example, what was said, even if you did the vetting properly, let's say there was nothing of concern, what he actually said was actually very close to the campaign, which is a terrible thing he said about, you know, Councillor Sam Hoy during the election, and then what he said in committee about children in care. So if you think, even if you do your vetting properly, like you can't, like, how can you predict some of those things? So there's an element of that. Obviously the party needs to take action and be able to have a mechanism to investigate and, you know, like have consequences for councillors who do those things, you know, after they're vetted and, you know, subsequently after they're elected as well. So I'm not sure how they dealt with those kind of things internally, but yeah, even if you ticked all the boxes before and someone says something that is, yes, not appropriate, not suitable, you can't really control that unless you want to apply your internal processes to kick them out of the group, you know, yourself.
I agree. Well, to me, there's an element of saying, I suppose there is an argument about Councillor Osborne, which is that the group are waiting for the outcome of whatever reports before they take action. But those comments about looked after children, some of his councillors would have been sat next to him when he said that comment. So
I mean that can be. I agree that there's stronger action.
What I have found is a Telegraph article from 2024 about Farage, where he threatened the vetting firm that he paid 144,000 to after accusing them of stitching up the party after a series of revelations about candidates. And as an example, after the Reform were hit by a series of disclosures about candidates, including one who described Hitler as brilliant at using personality traits to inspire people to action. Now, I'm going to make a point. There may be a point about the organisation that was involved in that. Great, and I sort of agree. But there's also a question about why are you attracting those sorts of people?
There are many big questions, and I think the process is definitely need to be improved for like the various reform groups to be able to, I guess, take action when those comments happen, and they haven't in most cases.
So we've got a question from Matthew, which I'm going to move on to in just a second. But let's just wrap up this bit about reform at County Council. So have they also? Is that you said there's a lead? Do we know there's going to be a leadership election? Has their leader stepped down at County Council from being the leader?
Well, that's what I heard, but it's not. Yeah, I don't know who is it now.
I haven't been watching county council debates very much, but how effective have they been? You know, so in my day as a county councillor, we had a Conservative opposition, and we had Steve Count as the leader of the opposition, and Steve's obviously a brilliant speaker, and would speak on almost every single item
for the full 5 minutes.
For a full 5 minutes. But I mean, you know, I didn't always agree with Steve, obviously, but actually, he was
doing his job as opposition,
absolutely, and made it feel like we had a credible opposition. Do we have that from Reform's leader? Do we have them speaking, you know, and offering an opinion on everything, on every single motion? It'll be interesting to see what happens with the budget, because that's really where leaders get to have their big say, isn't it?
No, not really. I mean, like, there have been a few speeches, I would say some very interesting ones, or some of the motions at full council, especially on the Lib Dem motion on trans rights. There have been a couple interesting speeches there, I would say. But I have to say on committee, I did expect a lot more activity. So, for example, just to give you an example, I was on communities a few days ago, and one of the items was the EDI plan and the update on the council's EDI plan. And it's a massive issue nationally for reform. It's like, you know, you remember all those reform headlines of like, we have to get rid of EDI officers, we have to reduce the EDI activity. And I kind of expected some comments around, you know, on that paper, but nothing has emerged. And I was sitting there and I was quite surprised, because I thought, like, surely that's a topic that politically a great deal was made of nationally about, you know, EDI gone mad, and like all the, you know, quote unquote woke agenda of councils and so on. So I thought surely there should be some commentary. I mean, it's great there was not, because the meeting finished sooner and there was actually quite interesting debate, and everyone agreed on the item, and actually it was taken by affirmation. We didn't even have a vote on that particular one, and others that I might have thought like, well, there should be some comment, but we'll get to see. I think you're right, Stephen, like budget time. I'm very interested to see if they actually go through the process to do a budget amendment as one of the opposition groups, because I would say definitely the other opposition groups will go through the process very likely. So I wonder if Reform actually do put in the work to do a budget amendment.
So and how has Ross Martin done, who is the leader at the district council? And Ross always does decent speeches at district council, and always plays the role as you'd expect him to do as leader of the opposition at district council. I guess Ross is doing the similar sort of thing at county council, isn't he, and making decent speeches?
Yes, I would say so. I think it's very similar to the district council meetings you're on, Stephen. What's actually interesting is how some of the political balance has changed, because obviously the Lib Dems now have a majority. So I think some of the more controversial items will actually see some of the opposition groups speaking against perhaps a Lib Dem proposal, which obviously was very different in the joint administration, where Labour, Independents, and Lib Dems were in the joint administration. Doesn't mean we agreed on everything, but I think there's more of a, at least for me, like now I feel, for example, when there was a proposal by the Lib Dems in one of the Constitutional Committee to remove supplementary questions from full council, I actually don't agree with that, and I feel I can speak against that and so on. Whereas obviously it's different when you're part of the a joint administration and so on. Probably I would still have been against, but I actually express a lot more of my views in opposition, and I can do a lot more local work, which is great. So there's pros and cons of being in opposition as well.
I find that supplementary questions thing fascinating, by the way, because when I was county councillor, one of the things the Lib Dems used to slam us about all the time was about openness and the need for openness in local government. It sort of changes when you get into power, doesn't it?
Yeah, but and also the supplementary question thing is the only real chance that anybody's ever going to do of executing a 1-2 punch on you, because the first punch, the one you get with the original question, you've seen the question in advance, you probably have officers' help in drafting.
The answer is read most of the times. That's why I'm against. Because if the question is not answered, I want to be able, as a member of the public, if I want the council to say, "Hello, you didn't answer my question as my supplementary. Can you please answer the question?" Because this can happen. So how you're able to hold into account anyone if they don't answer your question.
But it's the only real opportunity to put kind of political leadership under pressure as well, because you don't know what the second question is going to be, and you can ask anything. And that's the second question. It's the councillor as well, acting on their own instincts and their own experience, and not being completely guided by officers. So
I absolutely 100% agree. I mean, I didn't want to just go on to a specific topic, but I absolutely agree. But I can also see why, as a leader of the ruling group, I can see why you might want to do it. I don't think I would do it, but
what's interesting on this one is that, so basically, long story short, the Constitution and Ethics Committee actually on this proposal of removing supplementary questions. So myself, Simon Bywater, who's there as the Conservative member, and 2 of the Lib Dems on Constitution and Ethics, we said we're not happy with this, and we said to be named in the minutes of the meeting, so we are not associated with this proposal, right? And then basically the committee didn't have a majority to be able to approve that change, so we couldn't refer this as a recommended change, and we said we want to refer this for discussion at full council. Now the paper that's coming on Tuesday actually says we're not discussing this at this full council, we'll discuss it at a future council because we need to make some changes to the proposal. So I think they're going to drop it because they realize it's not good politically, but that's my view.
So let's move on to this question then from Matthew Setchell. Now Matthew is a friend of mine. I'll describe him as a flooding activist, but also community activist in St Ives. He's done loads of work on flooding, but at the moment, also probably related to flooding, he's also got concerns about the local busway, the guided busway, as many people in St Ives do. And his question is, question on the guided busway post local government reform: how will funding work for cross-border services like the guided busway? Well, the guided busway is really, I'm not sure, when you were involved in it, Martin, was it a GCP project before then, or was it before the GCP?
It was before the GCP, well before the GCP. So the GCP was formed following the City deal, which was 2014-15, and we actually put the legal dispute that I mentioned earlier on. We put that to bed 2013-14. So and that was following completion of the actual guided busway itself. So well before. it's a tough one, that, but where I've been involved in and seen local government reorganisation elsewhere, and I've done peer reviews of a couple of councils shortly after local government reorganisation, they basically come to it's part of the whole process. So one of the things they'll do is, once they've decided what the boundaries are going to be, they'll set up a shadow authority, and I think you all know they'll do that. And it effectively allows a year where you've got this shadow council running, where you put to bed a lot of these issues and emerging issues before you get to a point where the council's running. And effectively, in the 2 or 3 months, you would hope, before the formal elections take place for a new council, you're effectively running under that new council anyway. And so that's how, it's somewhere in that process, you would imagine that this will be, they'll deal with it in the same way that, one of the concerns in Whittlesey, and it's quite it's a relevant concern. There's two in particular that I've heard, is if we become part of Peterborough, our council tax is obviously lower than Peterborough's. And so how do we deal with that? And the way they do it is they don't do it immediately and bump you up to the same level. There's a period of transition, and all that is sort of dealt with and managed in that shadow process.
You have 7 years, I think, to 7 years to level the council tax. I actually think, because I was reading, I had a very long night last night reading the LGR papers. Very fun for full council. I actually think there's some modeling, and I think Peterborough, in pretty much all of the scenarios, is expected to probably increase their council tax compared to other authorities under like all of the different options as a result of LGR. However, it really depends what the new authorities agree, whether to put it at the lowest level or higher level. But Peterborough is actually set to probably increase.
Yeah, I mean, the other ones, so as an example, Huntingdonshire's car parking charges are very different to what Peterborough's are. So if Huntingdon becomes part of Peterborough, in Whittlesey, we've got free parking. And how do you deal with the fact that Whittlesey's got free parking and Peterborough doesn't when they're part of the same council? I mean, obviously, Paul Bristow's got something to say on that matter anyway, because he's trying to sort out free parking.
He wants to sort out free parking in Peterborough and St Neots, but not in St Ives, for example, as well. So he's doing that's not a blanket policy across the whole of the region. It's just for specific political campaigning points that he made.
The manifesto said Huntington as well, so I'm not sure what happened to that.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I find some of this stuff interesting, because it is such an anomaly that if you decrease and get rid of parking charges as a council, the town centre may benefit, but the council doesn't. The council, it's a big disbenefit to the council. And so, that quandary makes it really, really difficult.
Yeah.
I think it's like this idea of kind of subsidizing from what it would be like combined authority, taxpayer money, the free parking. Like, I was thinking, like, actually, if you actually want to incentivize people actually buying, stuff in town rather than just parking and maybe browsing around and not actually buying anything from the shops. I think like those schemes, I'm not sure how easy it is to do, but like, if you buy something from X shop, or if you buy something of this value, like some supermarkets have, then your parking is free for 1 hour or 2 hours. Doing that at a bigger scale, I'm not sure how possible it is, but that's something that to me is more kind of like, supporting business and at the same time offering a discount. If you just say, you can park in this car park for free, whatever you do, to me is like, well, wait a second, if you just want to use the space, shouldn't you just pay for it? If you want to incentivize the trade, you should discount the parking based on the trade that you're making in that area and how you're supporting the business. The
trouble with that in a place like Whittlesey is pre-2010, the government had a policy with town and city centres where if you developed in a town or city centre, you didn't have to provide parking spaces. Okay. And the theory being that if you live in a town centre or city centre, you don't necessarily need a car. I think that was the thing. It was one of the things that the Conservatives quite rightly abandoned. But we had a massive flats and houses built in the city centre in Whittlesey that all used the free parking.
Yeah, it's similar actually now with the enforcement Huntingdonshire coming, there's a few streets in St. Ives that, like, I think with the same idea, you aren't supposed to have, obviously everyone has like a car, or most people have a car, and the parking was obviously not enforced, although it was limited. So now there's an entire discussion around, okay, getting a space in the car park, which is obviously more, it involves a cost, or like using the park and ride, or doing a residence parking scheme or something else.
And the thing in Whittlesea with that is a lot of people say, well, so what? Let's just put parking charges in, and maybe you could have a resident parking scheme or something like that.
Or you can have a permit in the car parks for like residents, historic. You can do a historic permit or something like
that. The thing I have a problem with that, it's another taxation, effectively, and it is another taxation. And actually, these people bought, they bought those places, with a reasonable expectation that of how things were. So yeah. I'm really uneasy about it.
No, I agree with you on this. I just wonder if the technology doesn't allow, if you're going to charge just to exempt, because obviously you can register, whoever is the resident and not be subject to the charge or the enforcement. I think you could probably have.
Yes. Should we talk about parking? Maybe parking's a big topic, isn't it? Maybe we should talk about it in a few.
Yes, we should do a parking special.
We should get Paul to come on and talk about his proposal, which we've been threatening for ages. So that would be interesting. Can I quickly just go back to this though? So the politician's answer would be, you'd expect, no matter what happens with LGR, you'd expect authorities on either sides of borders to work together for the mutual benefit of their residents. That's the polite answer, but the reality is that hasn't really happened. So one thing that's going to be certain about LGR is that in every single proposal, South Cambs and Cambridge City are included together. There's none of the proposals which have any of those two separately. There was murmurings in the early days about a Cambridge only unitary, but that would be too small to be feasible, I think. So it's almost certain that South Cambs and Cambridge City are going to be together in LGR, and in lots of ways they have been over transportation because they've had the GCP, which was basically covered those two areas. And so I guess I asked Martin at the start of this whether the guided busway was a GCP project, and it wasn't, because it was from before the GCP. And so the guided busway goes to St Ives, whereas if you look at all the new proposals for other busways under the GCP, they all stop at the edges of South Cambs, and there's never any proposals to push these things on into places like Huntingdonshire. And so the difficulty is that these authorities will be focused on providing the best amenities for their residents and don't necessarily look across the borders, which is always my big argument about the fact that Huntingdonshire was never part of the GCP, because you could see with all of their plans there was like an invisible line between Camborne and St Neots where things just stopped.
The reason for that is specific, because the city deal was always about the Cambridge economy. And fundamental part of the city deal that seems to have been forgotten was a big part of the case we made to government. And I know we made it because I sat in front of ministers getting a grilling about it, which is that the city deal was about the lack of orbital capacity around the city, and the fact that the city, one of the things to get from one side of the city to another, you've got to go through it. And it was a massive part of the discussion because of how that inhibits growth, and it's never ever been dealt with.
Yeah. So LGR.
I'll start with the fun thing. So
can I just make one more point about the busway? There is another point that I think we need to think about with the busway, is how you manage it. We've got a combined authority, so that might be a solution. But the other thing is, the busway will be just like roads in that respect, to a certain extent, where if it's on your side of the boundary, you look after it, and if it's on the other council's side of the boundary, they look after it. There's no reason why it shouldn't be any different to a road.
And it's a massive pain in the arse because of all the safety considerations after the unfortunate accidents and fatalities as well, and all the fencing is not very popular. But actually,
hopefully all of that will be built and finalized before the new councils, obviously the safety measures and flood mitigation. I just hope the project is completed before the new authorities take over.
But despite all of that, and despite some of the negativity, as a bus-focused podcast, I think we agree, and Alex and I have been on it together. The busway is a fantastic asset, especially for St Ives, isn't it? In just getting in and out of Cambridge. I know it's not the best technology, and there's it's always controversial about light rail and those things, but actually, the working busway through St Ives, which isn't perfect, is a fantastic asset for those communities.
If you're a reluctant car user, and you're regularly travelling between Cambridge and Huntingdon, how else, or Cambridge and St Ives, how else are you going to do it? And the busway is great for it. It's really, really good. I think it's a great asset to the county. I know it's got its downside, and there are issues with it, like there are any asset, to be fair. But I think it's a great facility.
Yeah. So, Alex, big week in LGR. Yeah. So the county council, so the county is going to make its decision, I think,
Tuesday
this week about which option the county council.
No, about whether you agree with option A or not. You don't have all the three options presented.
That's the.
The paper is making the case on option A, and the recommendation is for the council to, if the vote is basically, do you agree for option A to be taken forward, and the case on before the 20th of October.
Is that an amendment?
No, I'll just. Yeah, you can vote for or against or abstain.
So you get to vote for. So sorry. So option A is the one which puts East Cambs, South Cambs, and Cambridge City together. Is that correct?
Yes. And Huntingdon, Sherwood, Fenland, and Peterborough.
And that's the one which the Liberal Democrat kind of leadership is proposing, and that's the only one. So it's not a free vote on all of the options. Yeah, and nobody's. Is there going to be a debate? Because I've heard.
There's debate. I'll read you the recommendation, Stephen. The recommendation is approve that option A should be the LGR option submitted to government by Cambridgeshire County Council in response to statutory invitation, and so on. And then approve that the proposal document for option A should be submitted, and so on. And delegate the authority to chief exec in consultation leader and deputy leader to finalize the document proposal for option A. And the paper, it's obviously you have the paper comparing different data on all of the three, option A, B, and C, but the case is made for option A. What I wanted to read to you, Stephen, especially for you, because I know Huntingdonshire is putting option E, and they're doing the work on option E, is what it says. So there's on 3.38, if you're interested, they refer to how members will also be aware that two later proposals have arisen and are being developed by Peterborough City Council, that's option D, and Huntingdonshire District Council, so that's option E. Neither of these options are professional considered to create, so that's their typo, not mine, to create a viable or sustainable future council, as the analysis in this report and appendices demonstrates, and these have not been included for full council for consideration. So I thought you'd like to hear that.
It says in the report. They are like proposals, and we haven't developed the business case yet. We will have done. Yeah, but also, to be fair, I think that county council moved this debate forward, as I understand it.
Yeah, so earlier. The placeholder was in November, so
there you go. So yes, those proposals haven't been developed, but that's because of a political decision to move the debate forward.
So here's the point, right? So you're coming forward with a recommendation that says option A.
Yeah.
Is it feasible for for an amendment to come through that changes that to option B or option C or even option D potentially? Because from my perspective, you might know this better than as an ex-chairman, Stephen, changing A to B does not necessarily fundamentally change the point of the motion, and therefore an amendment to say option B would be acceptable.
Unless it's considered to negate the purpose of the motion.
Yeah,
that would be the issue. I mean, and if the person is to propose option A, and then there's an amendment to say we're not going to do option, we can always vote it down, I guess.
Yeah,
I just don't think that's a really good motion. Do you? I think giving one option to the council is suspect in the first place. I can understand why you would do it in terms of making a decision.
Has it been through any of the committee system before it got to full council? Because that's the thing that would bother me. because the committee system is where the ins and outs and the niceties of what that means should have been discussed and agreed, and that's the bit I find. If you're going to have a committee system, use a committee system.
Yeah, I don't think it has. I mean, definitely nothing I heard of from the Labour colleagues there's at least one of us on each committee. So yeah, I mean, to my understanding, it's like this, and it's very simple. Like, well, the Lib Dems, who are the majority of the county council, want option A. It's pretty clear. Obviously, the case is, I'm not saying it's a bad or like good case against it. I think there's pros and cons, and like even in the paper, there's actually some discussion around like B and C and the comparison and so on. It depends like how you look at it. There's some things that when reading it, I pointed out how, I mean, I'll give you an example, how they justify 33% of East Cambs residents going to shop and socialize in Cambridge, how that is definitely proving the connection of East Cambs with Cambridge, but 28% of Huntingdonshire residents shopping and socializing in Cambridge doesn't prove the connection with Cambridge. I find it a bit hilarious, but it's...
And also they've got a railway line, haven't they?
No, because we have 8% going to Peterborough, so clearly this shows the connection to Peterborough.
But also, is there an amended option A, which is it those sort of things you could do, or an amended option A which says and half of Huntingdonshire, or which is my preferred solution.
Yeah, I mean, that's
to split Huntingdon in half, which I know one of the concerns I know about is the amount of work that would require in order to get revs and bends sorted and stuff like that. But those sort of amendments could come forward as well, or something that's a real sweetener to the Lib Dems, which is maybe something that East Cambs might do. I don't know, because I know East Cambs are very, very opposed to becoming part of Greater Cambridge. And I don't know whether that's political or not. I suspect it is, because obviously the Conservatives lose power if that happens.
I think it's almost all. I don't think Huntingdonshire's proposals are political, but I think probably all of the others really are different versions of gerrymandering. And I've got enormous respect for Lucy Nessinger, and Lorna Dupre as well. I count both those people as friends politically, but I mean I had a rant about this in front of St Neots Town Council and got told off, probably rightly, because I brought politics into it.
You can't bring the politics in the town.
I did. Town Council is a political organisation, by the way.
I know it's true, but I mean I'm not a member of that council anymore, and I was doing my county council or my district council report, and I upset the Liberal Democrat council, the county councillors who are in the audience, by saying that this is, in my view, it's a version of gerrymandering, and there's not a massively good reason for making East Cambs part of that unitary. I mean, you can draw the lines in different ways, I get it. But what upsets me is, as I understand it, is that the Lib Dems are whipping on this. Yeah.
Yes, and that's the thing as well. Is like, how can you? And I'll actually make this point, like, well, whether in the debate or not, is like anyone who's a double hatter, right? If you're listening to this, like if you're on South Cambs or Huntingdonshire district and you're also like on county, how can you be in a situation where you vote, for example, for like B, if you're like on South Cambs district council, and like go and like vote to the whip on A on the county council? Like obviously you have to pick one. Like pick the side you're on.
I agree, and if I was dual-hatted and was likely to be put in that position, I would just ask if I could abstain, because you can't, all politicians to a certain extent are hypocrites, and that's not a criticism. It's the nature of how politics
but it's a very well documented, difference, and you can't justify it.
No, absolutely, that is, it's pretty clear, and I would ask to abstain, and because you can't. There's no moral sense in you going to Huntingdon District Council and voting for option A, option B, option B or option E, and then going to County Council and voting for option A.
That's a dilemma faced by the only two members I can think of, is who's Julie Kerr from St Ives, and Tom Sanderson from.
Yeah, but I think there are a few in South Cambs who are on South Cambs district, and obviously South Cambs and Cambridge City.
It's not controversial in South Cambs, is it? South Cambs is going to vote for it anyway. Oh no, they're going to vote for the other.
They're going to vote for B, and the statement is out, and the majority of the public responding to the consultation, I think it's almost 80% are for option B. As well, it was in the press release. It is a joint press release from South Cambs District Council and Cambridge City, and obviously South Cambs District is with them.
Okay. The other thing about gerrymandering, by the way, is part of the reason why I think why I think Fenland are very, very quiet about the about their view, because they are really, really quiet about local government review. Partly because they're terrible at using their voice anyway. Their comms is the comms and that is dreadful. Something I dealt with last week proves that. But there's also truth that they think that a very, very strong Conservative vote in Fenland will get Peterborough back to being a Conservative-run council. I'm not totally sold on that, because I think the one thing that local government reform will do for Fenland is get the opposition parties working a bit stronger in the area, because they need to build themselves there. But that is how I see Fenland at the moment, and the reason why they're being so quiet is basically because of that.
So Alex,
go on. No.
Alex, at County Council, are some of the independents, Tom and Julie, part of the administration, or are they independents? Is a question.
I think there was an announcement a couple of weeks ago. They're it's like the Lib Dem and Independents group, but I'm not sure to what extent I don't think it's similar to joint administration, or you have a joint administration agreement. So I don't know as to the details as to like whether it's a budget thing or whether it's like other motions.
That's really interesting, whether they're subject to the whip or not, because that's going to be really interesting. But what I'm going to say now is that I know that Tom and Julie are both on the cabinet HDC, and I think we'll have to put that priority first, because we will be the decision makers in Huntingdonshire, and they can't pull themselves out of that decision by predetermining it with a different decision.
Yeah, obviously. And also, like, at the end of the day, even if you're in a Lib Dem independent group, like if I was in that, if I was in that situation, like I know that vast majority of my residents don't support option A, and I know like all the other reasons, plus, obviously the context in Huntingdonshire, like, so what? If you're an independent, like losing the whip from which party? You're an independent anyway. Like the worst thing that can happen is you're not aligned with the group anymore. Like, so what?
There's a reality. Tom can do what he wants. Yeah, if he's whipped by HDC cabinet, then yes, he's going to go.
There won't be a whip at HDC cabinet. There's not ever going to be a whip. There's not. We don't have a whip. We signed up for a whip on the budget, but that's never going to happen.
There's a reality. Tom can do what he wants.
Yeah.
That's true. He's going to justify it. And he's got to justify it to the people that vote for him. But he can do what he wants.
But so in terms of justifying to the people who vote for us, though, so for sure, and this is a point I make to sit at Neath's Town Council, which wasn't very popular with the Lib Dem County Council in the audience, is that if I'm going to be watching that vote, and if St Neots councillors, vote, to have St Neots and Huntingdonshire, but from my point of view, St Neots being part of Fenland, right? If they're going to do that, well, there's going to be political capital made out of that for sure by me, because I just think it's not acceptable.
If you ask their residents, drafted your leaflet in anticipation.
No, but I really have, because if you ask any resident, if we haven't done a poll, but if I did a straw poll of people on the street at St Neots and did it in the county council way, like, do you think that St Neots should be part of Fenland and Peterborough? I'm going to predict that the response will be in the very high 90s, if not 100%, no, because nobody where I live thinks that that's a good benefit. So if you're going to have St Neots councillors voting, I understand that your role as a county councillor is to put the whole of the county first, but also you have to represent your residents, and I will find it very, very strange if people,
not only representing
voting for us to be part of Fenland, and I think that I do think that
I suspect that Whittlesey residents would be against a merger with Peterborough, but and I sort of get that, but there's another part of that for Whittlesey, and definitely the whole of Fenland, because actually the further you move and go into Fenland, that the less the connection with the less the connection is there with Peterborough. I think something like 80% of the workers in Whittlesey actually commute to Peterborough for work. So you can, but that would be less so in March, certainly less so in Chatteris. So you can see that. But the no. There are, one of the things I keep pointing to people, although I've got my doubts about it, there are also benefits. Having a single council responsible for the traffic links and the road links and cycling links from Whittlesea into Peterborough is probably a good thing. Having this directly linked to the city where most of our residents are working, that's surely a good thing. So I do have concerns, but there are positives as well.
Yeah,
that's true. You could make the same arguments about Yaxley, by the way, and Sawtry and wherever, which is why I believe the split is the right thing.
Although there are Yaxley residents who don't like Peterborough encroaching over their boundaries either. I mean, it's not universally popular there as well because they feel
I agree, but if you're going to make a change, and if that happens, you can see the benefit that there are benefits as well as disbenefits.
If I'd been on the county council, if this had happened last year, when I was still on the county council and part of the administration, and somebody had tried to force me to vote for option A or whip me to vote for A, for me that would have been a resigning from the administration issue. I just wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. There isn't, my principals wouldn't allow me to do that, and I would leave the administration if that was the case. Or I would vote against it and face the consequences.
I mean, the way I see it is obviously there's different factors, not only the public opinion of residents, the travel to work area, the economic case, and so on. But for me, if I literally if I voted for option A, I can't justify it to my residents because, as Stephen says, pretty much everyone, I think I can count on one hand people who said, they actually, are more likely to go shopping in Peterborough and in Cambridge, or actually working in Peterborough, and obviously travel to work has existed in other parts, including outside of the county. But I can't justify the majority of my residents. So obviously sometimes a decision doesn't please everyone, but at least you can justify why it was, the best case, why it was the best decision. But in this case, it's just it can't be justified locally.
That's the whole thing for me about where politics falls down at the moment. Is in a big way is we follow people and we follow our residents. So if we get 100 emails that say I say we, I'm not a councillor, but if you get 100 emails saying I support this option, councillors feel almost threatened and forced to vote for that option because they think it's the voice of their electorate. That's not what you're elected to do. You're elected to listen to that voice. You're elected to use that voice to balance against the counter arguments and understand the counter arguments, make a decision, and then justify it back to those people and to all people. And more than ever, we have got an ability as councillors to actually communicate the reasons why we stood and vote for a certain reason.
So you have to be able to do that, don't you? And that's you have to be able to say, right? So I'm perfectly and have done on many occasions voted for things, which I don't think would be the first choice of my residents, But I've always been able to justify those, and in that situation, if I was making those votes, I would take the care to say that in debate during the council meeting, so that my record, my opinions were clearly noted, and so to just. I'm going to be. I don't often watch county council debates. I'm at work.
You can all watch it.
I'm going to watch it, and I'm going to be watching it, and I'm going to be clipping it. Yeah, I'm going to be doing all of those things because I think that. Well, the other thing is that we've got, I think, an excellent MP. Sorry, Alex, but Ben Abisi-Jekti, is doing a great job as Huntingdon MP. And he's put his cards on the table and said he supports Huntingdonshire District Council's proposal, but we've heard not a single word, from my MP, who's a Liberal Democrat, Ian Sollom, who's not said a single word about LGR. Now, I know they don't have any direct influence on this, but as elected, members of a community, you'd expect them to be representing some views and trying to influence their decision. Nick Johnson, former mayor, has said he supports option E. I'm not sure if Paul Bristow's put his cards on the table yet, but I suspect he will support the Peterborough option. I don't know, but I think it's important that all councillors make their views known. Not that we have any direct influence, but just so our residents know, that we're trying to influence the decision in whatever way we can.
Yeah, I've put this up from Helen. I think it's worth mentioning this here, just to reinforce a point. I get exactly what you're saying, Helen, because I have real concerns about the. Sorry, I'll cut that off now and hide it so that we can see Alex. But this is the point. We have to sit and look at this, not based on how the politics is going to be, but what is best for the residents and the residents of an area, and that's what we've got to try and counterbalance. I get the bit about the politics, mainly for me, because I see how poor the Conservatives are in Finland, and how poor the politics is in Finland as well, to be fair. Although I have to say there's some great independent and Lib Dem councillors in Finland, but the politics is really poor. And linking that in with some of the difficult politics and to a certain extent poor politics there is in Peterborough, I don't think is helpful at all. I really don't. But the issue is not from that perspective. The politics in this is what is best for the residents, not what is best for Party A versus Party B arguments.
I'll just say this because I actually have to go canvassing in a minute about the politics.
Go and deliver some leaflets.
Yes. I'll go to Wembley to see NFL.
On the politics, I think we actually do overemphasize, and often in conversations I don't want to be with X or Y because it's a Labour council, because it's a Tory council, and so on. Politics has changed already. We're not in a two-party system anymore. Most of the elections, the next, whenever the unitary is, will have 5-6 candidates. Surprises can happen. People say South Camps will always believe them. Who knows if other parties actually try to do more work, or the Conservatives target different areas, or if Labour starts doing more work, or they're good independents in the area. Finland will always be a Tory majority. Well, who knows now with reform and so on, obviously seeing the county council results, you never know. And this thing will go on for 50 years. And politics in 50 years, trust me, will not be the same as it is now.
And my view is the next general election is likely to be a hung parliament. And I suspect that will end up being a Lib Dem Labour alliance. And I suspect that the Lib Dems will make it a condition of that alliance that we move towards PR, or that there's referendums on PR. And I believe that. I believe in PR anyway, and PR totally changes the game as well. Yeah. And I think in a good way, because what it starts to do is build politics where political parties have to learn to work together, which is a big failing of not just our system, but what you see in America as well.
Right.
On that note, I'll let Martin do some leaflets and I'll go canvassing.
Yeah, well, good luck to Martin and good luck to all the other candidates. As long as democracy.
I'm just going to make a quick plug because I can, which is www.martincurtis.net, which is my blog, which is resurrected for this election. But if I get elected, I'll carry it on. But so if anybody wants to look at some of the issues,
Martin Curtis, all one word, or is there a hyphen?
It is Martin Curtis, all one word, .net. Yeah. I wouldn't go there, Stephen. There's a photograph of me on there.
I was putting in the chat, and hopefully, that might end your election chances if there's a. It hasn't come up. It hasn't done a preview, so please check that out, and we'll be back
next week with the results and full council review.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
And sorry, I'm going to put this up because we can, and we should. Just thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Nick.
Hope you're well,
thank you, Nick. Right, have a lovely week, everybody. I'm off to Wembley to watch NFL. These two are out doing political stuff in the cold. Don't envy them.
It's not cold. Cold is Romanian winter. I'm sorry. If it's not minus 20 degrees, it's not a cold to leaflet.
So Alex is out canvassing without a jacket.
I don't know how you do it. I don't.
Bye, everyone. See you later.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
That was a good one, wasn't it, mine?
It was good. It was very good. Yeah.
Cool.